generations. And now, the power of two restores the one.
We got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. It's been like 2 weeks since we've done a movie discussion, so we are back here with Wonka. This is the prequel to, from what I understand, the original Willy Wonka film. So obviously we went and saw it. We're going to tell you what we thought about it without spoilers first, and then we'll give it a rating, and then we will talk a bit about the movie with some spoilers. I guess... Sarah, do you want to go first?
Sure. I have seen the previews a couple of times, so I was a little bit nervous just because to me the preview he almost Timothy Chalamet. I'm not sure if I'm quite saying that right, but he almost seemed a little bit of like a nervous or awkward type Wonka, and so I wasn't sure how much I was really gonna like him playing the character. But watching the film, I feel like he actually did a really good job, and I really enjoyed this movie. I will say maybe I'm a teensy bit biased because I was kind of having a pretty bad day today, and this was like, okay, I need to pick me up. And the movie just it did that for me. It was fun. It was crazy at times, you know, with Wonka's typical Wonka and inventions, and various chocolates that do weird things.
It was also very bright and colorful, which was very nice.
Yeah, for sure. The songs, I thought that those were done really well. There's been a handful of movies somewhat recently. You're welcome to disagree, but there's been a handful of movies somewhat recently where the songs feel kind of forced or out of place, and I didn't really get that vibe with this movie. I felt like it flowed with the actual movie itself rather well. Um, was there a whole lot of substance to the songs? Some of them, not so much, but I appreciated the flow of the movie with the songs and that they didn't just seem forced. And to pinpoint a couple where I did feel like they were forced, just to give you kind of some reference, the new Little Mermaid movie, I felt like some of those seemed kind of awkward song changes. And actually the Aladdin movie that came out a couple years ago, that I felt like some of those songs seemed a little forced too. I understand those are both Disney movies and this one's not a Disney movie. Maybe that's the difference. But I felt like they just did a better job with making the movie flow from musical section to non-musical section. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I think as far as like the music, honestly, the best ones were the ones that they stole from the original, in my opinion. Otherwise, like, I'll give you guys a little bit of a reference here. I bought the record, like the vinyl record of the original Willy Wonka. I'm pretty sure we have it. And, you know, those songs are so good. I would just play it, you know, throughout my house. And I don't really think I feel that way with some of the newer songs that they had for this movie. But I mean, to your point, I guess they fit the musical formula, but they didn't have me super excited, if that makes sense. Except for the ones that were from the original, of course. For me, I did like the movie. I just thought it was a little bit distracting at times because of course, you know, you see a preview. I'm thinking we're gonna get, you know, a prequel about Wonka. Maybe we're gonna explain some things about, you know, who he is, what he's like. You know, how did he come up with this chocolate factory? And you know, from the previews, we're led to believe that he has basically nothing except for, you know, the recipes and what he can do with chocolate. He doesn't have any stores, doesn't have a factory, no nothing. And so my hope was that they would focus a bit more on him as a character and relating more to the original instead of I feel like the movie was kind of like a standalone thing where that I could very easily seeing them doing some sort of like series or trilogy where the original gets remade in like the final act or something, and then you know this is just something that's new. Because like my favorite thing about Wonka and the original was just how like kind of snippy and sarcastic he was, and that was very missing in the movie. I don't think he had that one bit. So there's just things that I was kind of hoping to see that really wasn't there, and maybe that's just the route that they're taking. And I will say, because I looked this up before we started filming, is that um, you know, the story, I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm probably gonna butcher it. The author of the books, do you happen to know his name? Roald Dahl?
I've always said Royal Doll, but I don't know if I'm saying it right either.
Okay, we'll go with that because that sounds better than what I said. Um, he was one of the writers for this movie. So, you know, the guy that was a part of the original stuff was part of this prequel. So, you know, I feel like me as a viewer, I have to kind of back off on the, you know, trying to have it relate because like, you know, something that's so precious to me like Star Wars, I think a lot of people wouldn't, you know, complain as much about the sequels if George Lucas was part of the writers, you know? So for this, with the original writer being involved, I kind of feel like, you know, it's not my project, it's not my things, like it's not what I made, so I don't feel like I can really give it that kind of judgment where I'm like, oh, it's just the movie, you know, studio is trying to make a quick dollar. No, it was the actual guy. So
I
maybe
feel
this
like
is
at
the
that point, there's a lot of things that relate to the original film, not necessarily from a like, oh, this is the exact same. One of them that I'll give as an instance that's I don't really think it's a spoiler. It's not like a major plot point or anything. It's a very minute thing that happens in here. But like, okay, in the original film, he has the kids sign that crazy, ridiculous
Mhm.
contract with all the fine print that nobody is ever able to read. So in this one, there is an instance with a contract where there's a lot of fine print that gets somebody in trouble. Is it a direct correlation? Not exactly. Is it a like familiar, like, oh, like this is kind of like a paying homage to the original? That I would say is true. Um,
That's
it,
exactly the example I was gonna give too. There's one other one where it was somewhat related because that's what I was looking for. I was like, okay, you know, there's the big room, there's the Chaco River and the boat, you know, there's the TV place, the bad eggs, and like the bubbly stuff that they got going on. So
fizzy lifting drinks.
yeah, I was looking for, you know, what are things here that could maybe evolve into those things. And instead, what we kind of got was, you know, he interacted with this. Maybe that was an inspiration later, like you said, the contract. Um, there's also a contraption that he made later that looked very similar to some of the tools that he used in the original in the factory. Um, but yeah, that those are kind of the things I was looking for, and there wasn't very much there.
Yeah. I think it was more hints at the original movie, not necessarily this is how he does it now and then evolving to how he does it in the original movie. It's kind of little Easter eggs, if you will.
I
I
kind
think
of think
that's kind of how they went with it.
I kind of think that's a almost a better way to do cameos because I know a lot of people say, "Oh, all Star Wars is now is like cameos," and you know, people only like the shows because they see people from the past, and you know, maybe this technique of, you know, kind of using the things, but not really using the things, to correlate, then maybe that might be a better way to do it. I know I keep relating, different things to my favorite franchise, but it, I love the original and I care about it. So, I want to care about this movie too. So I'm trying to, pick all the different pieces apart.
I would say one of my criticisms for this film was some of the singing, the lip syncing of it. It just from an editing standpoint, it didn't necessarily match the mouths 100%, and it looked a little choppy at times. I would say for the most part, it was fine, but there were a handful of scenes, especially with the young female assistant. Uh, I don't know if it, I don't know what the issue was, but there was an issue where sometimes it didn't even really look like she was the one singing. And whether it is her or not, it should at least look like she's the one singing, and it didn't really look like that.
Yeah, I felt that way too, even with other characters. Like there were times where I'm like, I feel like it's the job of cinema to like if you as the viewers, if you don't know, all those movies are lip synced. Like they don't actually film people singing. They basically will say like, sing it like you would, but we're gonna cut the audio from actually filming you, and then we're gonna go to, the music studio and then dub it over, basically. I think it's, the job of the director to try to make that as smooth as possible. And like you said, sometimes it just doesn't quite line up that way. Which is interesting because music is built in a way where, if you're reading the music properly, you should be able to, hit it perfectly, but I digress. I feel like there was. Oh, I was gonna say it is definitely a good family film. It is a great one to see around the holidays, like it is right now. So I don't want to feel like I'm. I don't want to feel like I am uh, bagging it too much. I'm just saying, like, I care about the original so much that I'm trying to get some validation out of why they would need this movie. And honestly, I don't really think they need it, but it was a good film. So let's just go into our ratings here. Sarah, what would you give this movie out of 10?
I have been a little loose with my ratings in the past. This is kind of a newer concept for us as we've only been doing movie ratings for, I don't know, like 6 months or so. But I gotta stick with a 10 out of 10 on this one. And it feels silly saying that because I know I've given it to a handful of films this year, but I would say if there was one film that we watched this year that I would be okay with watching over and over and actually enjoying it, not just passively having it in the background, I think it would be this one. I thought it was a lot of fun. Um, I enjoyed the silliness of some of the scenes. There were some characters like the one you see right here in my background. I don't know the actor's name, but there was some actors that, had kind of smaller parts that were fun that are well-known people. I thought that the main guy, Timothy, he did a really nice job, and it was just a fun movie. I really liked it.
Interesting. I'm curious to see when we eventually do our top 10 movies of 2023, where some of those 10 out of 10s are gonna align with one another. That's fun.
I think there's gonna be some that after, because I've sat on them for a while, I'll be able to kind of readjust and think more about, that way it's not just those were all ratings coming out of the theater and being fresh. You know what I mean? Like, because we haven't had enough experience to really feel out, I think, where the scale is. And my scale might need some adjusting because this one set the bar pretty high for me.
Are you insinuating that there are some backsies? Because there are no backsies.
Well, then maybe this is like a 10 and a half. I don't know what to tell you.
A 10.5 out of 10? What okay, I'm going on to my rating. I thought
But okay, hear me out. Maybe some of the other ones were like a 9.5, 9.6, but when you round, it's a 10. And then this one's just a flat 10.
You're delusional. Okay, mine is I would go, I'm sorry, Sarah, you're gonna hate me for this one. It's a good film. It's above average, but I'm gonna go with the 6 out of 10.
A
Um,
6? Oh my gosh, that's so low.
the reason why I say that is because, you know, I'm willing to admit that it is a good family film. It is. But when I was in the theater, I kept thinking like, okay, when am I gonna learn more about Wonka? Like I said, in terms of what he's supposed to be, and I didn't get enough of it, and so that really hindered it for me. Don't get me wrong, there's a couple of things that we do learn about Wonka in this movie, and that's great, but they had nothing to do with where he ends up. So, um, yeah, I'm sitting at a 6 out of 10. I apologize, Sarah, but it is what it is. Okay, so we are going to be moving on to the spoiler section here. So click away if you don't want to hear any spoilers. Um, let's see here. So of course, what we know from the trailer is that basically Wonka is, going to this town that he, as far as I know, hasn't been to before. And we jump right into that. Like he gets off the boat and then he's now at the town, and we get that little sequence that we see in the trailer where, he's dancing in the streets with the city people, and then, he gets uh penalized for daydreaming and he has to pay money and stuff. So we kick off with that right away. But, he's down on his luck, doesn't have much money. What he does have is his ideas for chocolate. He wants to be able to sell the stuff. So he goes to try to find somewhere to stay for the night, but he has no money. And so basically, he signs this massively long contract that he'll have the money the next day. And so he stays the night, and they agree that his stay will cost one, I think, shilling is what they called it. And so, the next day he goes to the town square and he has his chocolate and he's trying to sell it. He does phenomenal with it, makes a lot of money. But then the police come by and basically say, hey, you are impeding on the other chocolate sellers. So, you have to fork over the money that you earned. And so he loses all his money. And so he goes back to, oh no, he asked the cop for one shilling so he could pay for his room. So he does go back and he pays the one shilling. And the lady is like, you didn't read the fine print. You did XYZ while you were here, so you owe us this much money. And this is kind of where the film, really starts to settle in where it's going to be, the rest of the way. Basically, he doesn't have the money to pay for it. And so he basically becomes a slave to this woman, working in the basement and uh, cleaning towels and stuff for the hotel. And he finds out that there's tons of other people that did the same thing, where they now owe this lady money. And so he's basically trying to figure out a way to get out of the place so he can try to sell other chocolate, so that he can not only pay off his debt, but some of the other people's debt as well.
This was, I'm gonna pause here for just a quick sec. This was one of our first, aside from the contract and the fine print, okay, that was like, I guess that was kind of one of our first callbacks, if you will. But this whole washing scene and like, the songs of sorrow of having to wash the clothes and everything, that for me was another one of the big callbacks, because in the original, Charlotte Bucket's mom does laundry. They're very poor, so obviously she doesn't make a whole lot of money, so they're wearing a lot of like scrap clothing and whatnot, very much like these people. So that was another callback that I'd picked up on.
Interesting. I didn't. So when we were watching this, and I'll talk about a scene we get to here in a, well, who cares? We're in the spoiler section anyway. So at some point, I'm going to connect it back to what you just said. At some point later on, basically, Wonka is trying to get them all in on, trying to help him go sell things. And so one of his ideas is to basically trick the owner's dog into running on a treadmill to run the washer stuff for them. And when he did that, he, made contraptions that were like spinning and, cleaning the clothes, and I was kind of wondering, where have I seen this before? I can't, and I was like, it's not the mom scene. It's when they're in the factory of the chocolate factory, right around the time where um is it Veruca? No, not Veruca. Who's the
Violet?
Violet? It's when Violet is getting the gum candy. It's in that scene where he has like these weird mechanical things that are making his chocolate. That's where I saw this thing where they're like spinning and whatnot and doing a job. I didn't make that connection though, like the laundromat and the mom. That's a good one.
Yeah,
That is
because they
a
were
good
even
one.
pushing the clothes around in those giant wash tubs with big sticks, just like she did.
Yeah, and what was I was also wondering about that too. Like, not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna watch the original when we're done with this and get some food. Um, but I feel like wasn't there a scene where Wonka had like a big paddle and he was mixing things too? I could have sworn that was in the factory, right before he showed them the everlasting gobstopper, but I don't know. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
It's possible, but I don't remember an exact scene.
Okay, so let's get back to it. If you feel like I am gonna skim over some small things. But if you think something's important, just let me know. So Wonka's trying to, like, he first goes out, I believe, by himself, with a little bit of help, trying to go out to the streets to sell candy. He does, but he gets
So that's
caught.
when he gets caught by the policeman, who is played by Keegan Michael Key. I looked that up. And so he is a dirty cop, right? He's
Yeah,
being paid by the chocolate cartel, which is the other chocolate makers in town, to basically get rid of Wonka. But what we learn is that the other people who are stuck at the hotel as laundromat slaves, for lack of a better term, just because they're working off a debt that's bogus. Uh, One of them is a plumber, so she knows the streets and can help him figure out the sewer spots to disappear from the police. One of them is a call operator, so that kind of plays into their master plan later in the movie. One of them is an accountant, so that's how they figure out how to find the dirty books to figure to figure out how to really take down the chocolate cartel because he knows where they keep all of their accounting books on who they've paid off, even though they really shouldn't have a paper trail for those types of things. Um,
yeah.
and
Why
then
would you?
it's a great question, but I guess they just didn't learn yet at this point. Uh, oh, and then there's a comedian, which honestly I felt like his character was kind of a waste. Um, but I guess he was kind of put there just as comic relief because he was supposed to be funny and he was kind of really not that funny.
Yeah, like you said, he didn't really have a reason to be there, which was kind of weird.
Yeah. But yeah, so we go from Wonka sneaking out on his own to Wonka sneaking out with this group of people and them trying to help him um sell chocolate on the down low. Of course, the town people really like it. Um, we also have a run-in with the Oompa Loompa, who the little girl, her name is Noodle. She obviously does not believe Wonka that this little orange man with green hair exists because it sounds wild and crazy. But eventually she sees him at the very tail end of the movie. I don't want to skip quite that far ahead, but just noting that we see him kind of throughout the film. Um,
I I mean, I don't know the exact timestamp, but I would argue that he was in like the second half of the film, or I would
yeah,
even say like the last part of the second act slash beginning of the third act, and I thought that
he's
was a
he's
mild
brought up
disservice.
earlier in the film, but we don't see him until the second half.
Right. Let's see. Because there's a lot of stuff that we can really glaze over. It's not super important, but yeah. So Wonka tries the first time kind of on his own, realizes he can't really do that on his own, and so he starts to get everybody else involved. He does go out he needs more milk at one point, and his friend says, "Well, just take this milk," and it was like a milk on someone's front door or doorstep, whatever you want to call it. And he's like, "No, I can't have regular milk. I need giraffe milk because all of his chocolate concoctions are made out of just random things from all over the world." And so they go to the zoo and they, milk a giraffe. And so they do have some sort of like character development there where we're learning more about his friend. And this is one of the things I
Noodle.
thought, huh?
Her name is Noodle.
Yeah, Noodle. This is one of the things I thought was kind of interesting. Like, whoa, they actually went there, kind of a thing with them, with her character. And uh, I'm gonna splice the two scenes together because we learn in this scene that, she uh, was basically adopted, kind of a thing. Like she doesn't know who her mom is. She just has like a ring that has like initials on it. And we learn later on that Slugworth actually knew her mom. I forget what the relation was. Was it
So
sister-in-law?
Slugworth and his brother were heir to a big fortune. Slugworth's brother uh got his girlfriend pregnant, but they hadn't been married yet, I don't believe.
Right,
And Slugworth's brother died before the kid was born. But what that means is that Slugworth and the kid are heir to the fortune. Well, Slugworth doesn't want to share a fortune,
right.
so when Noodle's mom, which was the brother's girlfriend, she didn't have any money, and Noodle, as a baby, was sick. So she asked Slugworth for help. Slugworth made the mom believe that she died because he didn't want to share the fortune. And instead, what he did was drop her off at this hotel, and she basically became the the
Cinderella.
yeah, the laundry girl for the hotel.
So,
So the mom thought that she was dead when in fact she was not. And the girl, being a baby when this happened, doesn't know who her parents are and just thinks that she's an orphan.
right. And so I thought it was kind of uh I don't know what the word is, risky or brave. Like, I thought it was kind of a dark take to be like, oh, she was like, he took her to the hotel and just threw her in the dumpster, basically, because it was a chute that led down to the slave area, quote unquote, where they, did all their work in the basement. And
Yeah, I thought it
so,
was crazy she wasn't just left on the doorstep. She actually dropped down a really long laundry chute that I feel like it would have killed a baby if you actually put a baby down there.
yeah, so like when I saw that, I was like, whoa, like that it seemed a little unnecessarily dark for the film, especially with, how lighthearted the film had been. Um, but yeah, so we learn a lot about her in that way. We also learn about Wonka a little bit between the two's interactions throughout the film. We learn that Wonka used to basically live on a boat with his mom and travel around everywhere. And she kind of had her own uh, special recipe for chocolate and stuff, and told him that, she would tell him the secret to the chocolate one day, when he, has made it, kind of a thing, when he grows up. And she dies too, unfortunately, before he can learn what the secret is. So this whole time, he kind of has it in his heart that, once he actually makes it big, that maybe he will somehow, see what that secret was, um, that she never told him. Uh, Kind of like a spiritual thing that, drives his goal to be the best that there is at making chocolate. So the film basically progresses towards the whole group wants to be involved to, take down the chocolate cartel. Wonka does, eventually get the shop that he daydreamed about in the very beginning, and fills it with all his awesomeness. But the cop was paid off to do something about Wonka, and basically. Through the process of all of it happening, the people that own the hotel slash laundromat they slipped a little something in Wonka's candy. And this little something is basically something that grows a lot of hair and changes your hair different colors and stuff. And so the people went berserk in his shop. And then one of them was like, "Oh, you gave my daughter a mustache? Well, I'm going to, ruin you." And she cuts this rope and the chandelier falls down and sets the place aflames. Uh, and, Wonka is just standing there in the ash of, what was supposed to be his awesome shop.
Before you get too much farther, this was another callback scene for me when the store was first opening, because he took a random citizen and was like inviting him into the store, right? And everything's not quite what it seems. And so then it seemed like an older gentleman that didn't have a whole lot of stability because he had a cane. And it wasn't just like a walking cane for fun. It looked like a walking cane he needed for he looked like an older guy that needed a cane for walking, right? Uh and by the end of this song or sequence, he's hopping and skipping and dancing just like Wonka is. And to me, that reminded me of Grandpa Joe, because in the original films, Grandpa Joe was basically bedridden because he was um, old and didn't really have a whole lot of mobility. But when he got the golden ticket, then he was hopping around and everything else.
I didn't really put that together personally. I think I was already so focused on being like, okay, maybe this is when we're gonna get some stuff, learning more about Wonka, but we kind of didn't really. Um, Although I do feel like his initial shop kind of may have been like an early stage of eventually that big open room that he has in the factory where you can literally eat whatever you want, because that's what everybody was doing here is, eating the flowers, eating there was a huge leaf that a kid was eating at one point. And so I
The
feel like,
edible teacups, we saw those a couple times in this film.
yeah, and it wasn't until the board game for Willy Wonka, I didn't know that those things are made out of honey. I think it was like Honey Crisp Cup or something like that. Um, But yeah, so the chocolate cartel people show up and they're like, "Hey, we are willing to pay not only you, but pay for all your friends to have freedom from, the laundromat place. And then if you leave and never come back and agree to never sell chocolate, we'll pay it all off." And so he agrees. Wonka agrees, and he gets freed. All the friends get freed except for one. We'll talk about that in a minute. Um, Wonka, they send, or they're gonna see Wonka off. Like they take him to the boat, and they hand him a ticket and stuff, and uh, he gets on the boat and he's taking off. He's sitting there, and the Oompa Loompa is also there. The Oompa Loompa is following him because when Wonka went to their island, he took a couple of the coconut or the chocolate seeds that they
Cacao
have,
beans. Hmm.
cocoa beans over there, while he was on duty. And because he let it slip, he was basically banished. And so now he's, following Wonka around because he feels like he owes him something. And so he's on the boat too. And they talk it out and they kind of get like an idea of what to do. They don't tell us what the idea is because they're like, we don't have time to talk about it right now. We'll talk about it later, kind of a thing. That way, us as an audience don't know what they're doing. And they go to tell the captain to turn the boat around and find out it's full of dynamite. And so the cartel actually was trying to kill Wonka, um, which I actually loved the Oompa Loompa scene here, because as soon as he saw it, he somehow had some sort of life jacket that was his size to jump in the water and go. So I thought that was kind of hilarious. Um, but they swim back to shore, and then we start talking about the others that were getting freed. The one that didn't get to go freely was, I'm sorry, you said her name once already.
Noodle.
Noodle. That's right. Noodle did not get to go free. She was actually part of the deal where she didn't get to leave ever. So we had that issue there, and she gets thrown in like this little dungeon area. It's kind of like a little bump out in the building up top. Where
They
you get
call it a bird coop because it's full of bird poop.
oh, I didn't catch that. That's like their version of a timeout. And so when she's sitting in there, Wonka uses they taped like a bunch of ladders together so that he could reach up there. Definitely not OSHA approved. But he goes up there and he's talking to her, and then somehow the rest of the group, like a couple of the other people of the group, get up there too. I'm thinking like this is gonna be a hilarious shot to see what's going on here when they finally show what's on the outside. And basically, Wonka is the only one on the ladder, and then everybody else is just standing on the ledge. Um, but this is where they finally come together to devise some sort of plan to take down the chocolate cartel. And so basically what happens is they know about the special book is in like the basement of the church. And so Noodle finds a way to get some of the candies that the giraffe really likes in his pocket. And then they send the giraffe in there, and I thought it was kind of funny. He was like, this is Judgment Day, like definitely didn't see it happening this way, kind of a thing. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I can't remember his real name. I just had it a minute ago, but the Pope or whoever he is played by Mr. Bean, if you know who that is.
Yeah. And so the giraffe basically paves the way for the rest of them to go in there. Um, and Wonka and Noodle eventually make it all the way down to where the vault is for the cartel. And they find the book. But just as they're about to, leave with the book, the cartel corners them. Uh, Slugworth has a gun and he's, threatening to kill them. And so they have to hand over the book, and then in this vault, that's where all the chocolate funnels in from the three different companies. So basically, they all make money together. And so they're like, what a better way to die than death by chocolate, which is a very good ice cream, by the way. So they make them go into the chocolate area. They lock the door. Um, and right before they leave, Wonka gives them a jar of candy, saying there's a little orange guy running around that I'm supposed to give this to. Can you give it to him? They play it off like, yeah, we will. And they don't because they eat it. Um, they shut the door, they start filling it with chocolate, and our heroes look like they're gonna be drowned by chocolate as they get to the top, and they see, the cartel looking down on them as if they're gonna die. They walk away, and then the Oompa Loompa arrives. Our hero, knight in shining armor. He is there to save the day. He goes down in there and uh, basically finds a way to get that chocolate to disperse out from that little room.
It's like pulling the drain.
Yeah. Let's see here. So they get out. Everybody, the cartel is shocked that they're able to get out, and they present the police with the book. They find out, the cartel was in on some shady stuff. They find out that one of the cops was in on some shady stuff, so they're all gonna go to jail. But Wonka also reveals that the candy that the cartel people just couldn't, put down is actually the kind from the very beginning of the movie where it makes people float. And so when they ate it, it made them float away, way far away. Who knows where they ended up? And then this is basically where Wonka solidifies his part in the town. He says to the Oompa Loompa, hey, I'm going to open up a factory. I'm going to need somebody. And then we kind of get to see his imagination play out, what his factory will look like. I'm not 100% sure where they're going with this because the factory didn't look exactly like the one from the original. So I don't know if this is going to be one of his factories or if this is supposed to be the factory eventually. Like, is this the
I would say
alien?
this movie takes place a good handful of years, if not decades, before the original film. So there's a lot of time for that factory to evolve.
This is true, but
Because the original is him trying to retire, so he's getting up there.
right. What I was also going to say though too is that is this the area that Charlie Bucket, grows up to? Just trying to paint the picture between the two things going on there. Is Grandpa Joe, living in this town right now? Who knows? Um, so little things like that. And then we also get a little bit of, all right, there's two other things that we get some closure on. One is that Noodle actually does reunite with her mom. It was a great little hallmark moment there. And then the second thing is that as Wonka is, seeing everybody enjoy chocolate, because when the Oompa Loompa, redirected the chocolate out of the room, they put it through the pipes and they launched it, and then it's like filling the streets with chocolate, and so everybody's eating it. As he's watching people enjoy this chocolate, he pulls out the little Wonka bar that he's been saving from his mom, and he opens it up, and turns out the secret isn't like an ingredient in the chocolate. The secret is basically being able to share the chocolate and enjoy it with your friends. And so he breaks off a piece for all the different people that helped him, and then we finally get to close that out as well.
Actually, as you say that, that reminds me of another callback. Remember when I have two to do right now. One is when Charlie gets that chocolate bar, even though it doesn't have the golden ticket, he still breaks off a piece for each of his family members to share it. So it was very similar to this. And two was the chief of police. He had been paid in chocolate for most of the film from the chocolate cartel. So you can see him putting on a lot of weight throughout the film because he's eating an enormous amount of chocolate in a very quick little amount of time. And I think somebody said he put on like 130 pounds in 2 weeks, which is obviously impossible. But, you can see his suit getting bigger and bigger. And then eventually the belt buckle for his suit jacket snaps and pops off. Very similar to Violet when she was turning violet and turning into a blueberry, and her jacket buckle popped off.
Which is also kind of funny because what color is the cop wearing?
Wearing blue.
So
It's
yeah,
kind of like Violet, because she was wearing blue.
yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what the movie closes out with. We do get a little bit of a highlight reel of what happened to different characters, where they are now, kind of a thing, which is interesting. Felt a little out of place, but it's all right. I feel like there was something else I wanted to say. There was kind of a weird instance where, so like when Noodle tells Willy Wonka, "Hey, just use this milk," and she takes it from somebody, he acknowledges that stealing is very wrong. But then I think it's that same night when him and Noodle go out to the zoo, on their way back, he steals like 100 balloons, and so it kind of seems like, where are your what is that? I'm lost for words.
Well, it's like, where do you draw the line? Where's your
Yeah,
conscience?
yeah. Where are you on this? Because you just told her you can't steal milk, but you just stole a whole bunch of balloons, from somebody. So, uh, just little things like that seem to kind of clash a little bit, but it wasn't a lot. It was honestly something that they were probably like, you know what, for this musical sequence, it would be kind of cool if they grabbed the balloons and they floated. I don't really think that,
It made me feel like Mary Poppins.
yeah.
There was another weird like side plot between our shopkeeper or hotel owner, pointing the wrong way. This lady on my side here, between her and essentially her bodyguard. Part of the plot to get her distracted so that everybody can sneak out is making her think that the bodyguard guy is like a duke or something. Uh, and Willy Wonka tells this guy, like, she has the hots for you, right? And then he tells him some weird rhyming thing that ends with, if you want her to sigh, show her some thigh. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he was even able to say that in a PG movie. Because it's just, you know, seeing these films that are rated G or PG as an adult versus seeing them as a kid, you pick up on a lot more things. Like, I'm sure a little kid's not going to think anything of that. Just we see him later in some like lederhosen with that are very low cut, like you can see a lot of his thigh, and it's just it's just so funny. I got a pretty good kick out of that little love connection and how that developed.
Yeah. And see, that was kind of like some little spurts of, um, I would say, somewhat connecting to, later on from the original, like more adult comedy or, sly things to say. I wish we would have gotten a little more of that, because that definitely was something that surprised me that they said. Between that and throwing the baby down the chute, I'm like, interesting, interesting choices here. Um, yeah. The movie was very colorful. I thought that was kind of nice. It was a little messy at times with some CGI. There were some shots where I'm like, this definitely looks like someone is in front of a green screen. Um, like the dynamic didn't quite match with them supposedly being in the room. So, um, some of those things were a little off. But again, overall, it was a pretty good movie. And definitely a good family film to go see over the holidays. Um,
Absolutely.
was there anything else that you wanted to mention here?
No, I feel like that closes it out pretty good.
All right. Well, that was our movie discussion on Wonka. Um, we recommend you see it for sure. If you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified when more of our movie discussions drop. I can tell you right now a couple of them that are coming up. We got Aquaman that we'll be talking about, Ferrari, and then one that I haven't told Sarah about that I want to go see is called Civil War. That one's going to be it's an A24 film, Sarah. So
Ooh.
exciting stuff. Drops a like if you like the video and drops a comment letting us know your thoughts on Wonka. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.